Okay. All right. I think we're finally live. Took me a second to figure that out. So if you're here and you're live, go ahead and add, just be talking in the chat. I would love to hear your questions. I'm going to get to those in just a second. And we're going to stay like on a tight timeline. I've got to hop off at like, I think 1:25. So we'll be together about 20, 25 minutes. And this whole live is just to help you feel more confident about your upcoming birth, or maybe you're not even pregnant and you just want to learn about natural birth. I think that's a great idea too. That's how I started learning, but was before I was even pregnant. So let's just jump in. My name is Lana. I have 5 small kids, 9 and down. I'm married to Matt. I started Girl Teach Me. And so what that really means was just in my walk with Christ, the main way I felt like I was growing besides reading my Bible was reaching out to other women and saying like, hey, can you teach me how you read your Bible? Can you teach me how you love your husband, how you take care of your kids? And so mentorship has been a big part of my walk with Christ. And so that's why I named this channel Girl Teach Me. So how did I become interested in natural birth? It's very crazy because I used to be so scared of birth. I was terrified about it. And I believed, pretty much every scary birth story I'd heard, TV, movies, things like that. And that's just my experience with natural birth. And I was terrified. But then it was just the Lord that really intervened. I was getting my master's at UT, and I signed up for this last minute elective called maternal childhood nutrition. And in that class, she just opened my eyes to how natural, normal, and even beautiful birth can be. And I just realized, like, okay, this isn't something I have to be scared of anymore. And, going into my first birth, I was still terrified. I wish I could have talked to more women about birth. And that's something I'll talk about later. But 5 natural births later, I can tell you that the majority of what I learned in that class has proved to be true. And that about 95% of the time, birth doesn't really need any interventions, and that it's not an emergency to be saved from, but rather a portal of growth to prepare for. And so that's what this live is about, is just helping you prepare, helping you feel better about the experience of natural birth. And so I'm going to kick it off with the questions that I've already received, but I really want to hear your questions. So if you can just add those in the chat, I will just roll through those. And there's no silly questions. This is a safe place to ask questions. And we're not going to shame each other for asking questions, because that's how we learn, is just having the courage to ask. And if you're wondering it, somebody else is probably thinking it too. So I just encourage you to ask. Okay, so the first question comes from Katie, and she said, why even natural? Like, why? When I say natural, first of all, I'm talking about an unmedicated birth. And so she would say, why, if I can have a pain-free birth, why would I even try to go for unmedicated birth? And there's a lot of reasons. We could talk this whole 25 minutes about that. But I think the top ones off the top of my head are a couple of reasons. One, when you don't have, and I'm going to call it interventions, anytime you have, you get induced or you have an epidural, that's an intervention, and that can cause a cascade of more interventions. And so, a lot of people, they might just get an epidural, but it can cause more and more and more interventions, to the point where you might end up with a C-section, and that really wasn't your plan at all. Another reason is it's just going to be a lot easier for breastfeeding after. We can avoid epidural injuries, things like that. And then just also, like, when you look at a lot of mammals, and what we know about mammals is that actually going through a little bit of pain of childbirth actually helps the mother and the baby bond. So it's just something to consider, that perhaps God has some redeeming purposes in this, and that it's not just purely the curse, but maybe God has some goodness for us in this birthing process. And actually, recovery is way faster generally after a natural birth. And I've really found that to be true. I was at Target the day after having one of my kids, and the guy at Target was like, how pregnant are you? And I'm like, I just had my baby yesterday, so I still look pregnant. So you can recover a lot quicker. The next question is from Nikki, and it says, how do I give myself the best shot at going natural? And that's why in my course, I put a lot of emphasis on how to have a healthy pregnancy. And actually, you can grab the pregnancy survival guide. I think it's down below, but it's completely free. And I talk a lot in there about preparing for a healthy pregnancy, because if you can stay as low risk as possible, then that's going to increase your chances of being able to go natural. And so I think, one, having a healthy pregnancy, but two, I think it's getting the right birthing team on board. And so what I mean by that is, getting people on your birthing team who are going to be there at your birth, who are that most of the births they do are natural. Most of the births that they do are unmedicated, because that's what they're going to be used to doing. And it's very hard, I think, to ask somebody who has a protocol that they're used to following to change that protocol for you. And so if you can just think about, who do I want on my birth team I'm not going to have to fight? Because I think when you're in that moment of trying to give birth, it's a very vulnerable moment, and you really, really want to just feel safe. Feeling safe is the number one thing you can do for your brain to reduce pain, because our brain decides 100% of the time if we feel pain or not. And so you really don't want to be in a birthing situation where you're having to fight and advocate for what you want, because the moment somebody uses a fear tactic, it's going to be hard for you to discern, like, I don't want to hurt my baby. Nobody wants to hurt their baby. And so, yeah, I would say, one, have as healthy of a pregnancy as you can. Two, get the best birthing team. Interview people. In that pregnancy survival guide that I include, it's free, it's down below, questions to interview your provider. Like when you go to buy a house, you interview different real estate agents, or at least you should. You should definitely be interviewing different people, and not just going to the OBGYN that you already have an existing relationship with. They may be great at OBGYN care, but that, like, for pap smears and things like that. But birthing, I would just encourage you to go and interview. It can't hurt. Okay, so Katie Hardell says, I'm heavily considering midwifery, but a little leery of the pain. Can you take me through getting through the childbirth piece? So yeah, being leery of the pain. And like I said, feeling safe is the number one thing that's going to reduce your pain. If you can feel safe and tell your brain, I'm in a safe place, and really truly be in a safe place, then your body's not going to admit more pain. Like, your brain decides, should we release more pain or not? And so staying calm, feeling safe, and actually just doing a lot of birth prep, mind work, where when you get in that situation, you are able to stay calm, and that's going to help reduce the amount of pain. And just also knowing that this is a working pain, not a hurting pain. Those are very different things. And if you have been somebody who works out, you very quickly know the difference between, like, I'm pushing myself really hard and I am breaking my ankle. And I would say most labor pain is a working pain. If it's not, when you add in like a synthetic pitocin when you're induced, that's just a little bit different. But when it's your body's natural processes, your body also releases something called oxytocin, which is a natural pain reliever your body sends out, and that's going to reduce the pain a significant amount. It's far more, I think they said it's like, I don't even know how many more times more potent than like morphine. Like, your body naturally gives out oxytocin, but if you're fearful, that counteracts the oxytocin. So if you feel calm, because oxytocin is a sex hormone, so you got to think, like, you've got to be calm and relaxed. That's the only way you're going to get that oxytocin. So it's really important to know how to take control of your brain. It's a great question. Okay. Have you heard of the supernatural birth? I have heard of the supernatural birth. I read the supernatural birth book. To me, it feels, and this is where I could be slightly ignorant, it feels a little bit like manifesting to me. And that doesn't seem to jive with my faith a whole lot, because and I could have this completely wrong, but it's a little bit more of like, if you believe it enough, you're going to have a pain-free birth. And I think it is important, like I said, to feel safe, to know this is good, to know this is a working pain, not a hurting pain. I have had a friend who has literally had zero pain in birth. So I know it is possible. I just don't want anyone to ever feel like a failure if birth is uncomfortable, if there is working pain. I don't want them to feel like they're a failure, or they didn't like name it and claim it or something. That is not my Christian faith is like, there's going to be hard things, and it's not because of my lack of faith that there's hard things. So That was my only qualm with the book, but the book does a good job of like helping you see that birth is not scary. So that was my experience with the supernatural birth book. Um, with your first baby, did you take any birthing classes, infant care classes, or breastfeeding classes? Yes. Kira, I think I'm saying your name right. With my first baby, I took a hypnobirthing class. Now I was out in LA and I can tell you it was a little out there. It was a little, I don't think all hypnobirthing is bad by any means. I think there's a great app called Christian Hypnobirthing that has some good like affirmation like tracks. I think that's great. Um, I didn't love it because I felt like it was just strange. I don't know. It wasn't my favorite. And I took a breastfeeding class, and 100% I would recommend taking a really good breastfeeding class that I like to find people who are through a midwife because they're a little bit more natural minded. But the breastfeeding class was great. My husband and I went through it, and I think it really helped him understand the why so that when things got hard, he was better able to help me. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend getting just any kind of preparation that you can get is going to help you feel more safe. Like an interesting bit of research is before somebody goes into a surgery, if they can watch a video where they understand what is happening in the surgery, their recovery is so much quicker. And again, it's back to that brain piece that their body feels safer knowing, okay, this is what's about to happen. And the same goes for birth. If you know, anatomically what's happening. And if you understand that every contraction is bringing you closer to baby, you're going to be so much more willing to embrace it, submit to it, go with the process, keep your heart and your mind on baby and not just be like, this is something I have to endure, you know, because it's not, it's a portal of growth. There's so much to gain through the process too. Um, can you speak a little on fundal massage? Is it really necessary? Are there any risks? I didn't do it. I don't know. I had a midwife who was like, "Meh." So I really leaned into my midwives, especially my first couple of births, which is a big reason why I love getting a midwife because when I would go to their appointments, they would sit and talk with me for no joke an hour. I would come with a big list of questions and you know, they would just sit there and educate me. And I feel like it's been, you know, 5 births of, you know, 1 hour appointments of just me picking a midwife's brain. And so for that reason, I didn't do it. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just that my midwife was like, she's like, I really don't feel like I've seen much of a difference. So great question. If y'all have any more questions, I think I've got like 10 more minutes. I would love to hear y'all's questions. Okay, I got another question from Emily. She asked, did I use an OBGYN or just a midwife? Great question. So when I was out in LA, I think the laws were that my midwife had to be observed by an OBGYN. And so I had my first at a birth center and I did have to go to like an occasional OBGYN appointments and I would sit there for like, I think 3 hours because I wasn't one of the regular patients. It was so annoying, but um, I have just really enjoyed midwives. One thing to know about midwives too is not every midwife is the same. There's like a nurse midwife and then there's just different types of midwives and some are going to be more like western medicine and some are going to be just all they do is birth. And then also there's midwives who are really hands off and midwives who are like, you don't need a doula, I am your doula too. It's really important when you're interviewing your midwife, like asking the question, are you really hands off or are you going to be with me? Because my first midwife, it wasn't that she was a bad midwife. She just was very, very hands off, like to the point where I was left for what felt like hours. I'm sure it wasn't by myself when I really needed to be coached on what I was doing. And for that reason, I would say I really wished I'd had a Christian doula the first time. I think my husband really could have benefited from somebody coaching him and telling him what to do and how to help me because he wanted to help me, but he just didn't know what to do. So I'm a really big advocate of getting a doula if you can. If you can't afford a doula, I would try to get somebody on your birth team, like a mama who's already done it, somebody, especially if you're a Christian, somebody who can be praying over you. That I think that it's just for me, the spiritual environment was also something I was thinking about. Like I wanted people in my birthing environment who believe this is good, were praying for me, were helping me to stay positive and be thankful to the Lord. And so that's something to think about too. Like I know this isn't exactly the question, but if there is somebody you feel pressure having at your birth, but you feel like they, in the end, they don't feel like a safe person to you, like maybe it's a strained relationship with a family member, but you feel like you have to have them in that birthing space, you don't. And so that might be a chance for your husband to run interference or something, or the doula or the midwife. They're happy to run interference for you. That's like half their job is running interference. They will send people on errands that will take them hours to do just to get them out of the birthing environment, because it's really interesting, even with animals, like if they don't feel safe, they won't birth. And um, like a gazelle can almost have a baby, or their baby completely born, and if a predator comes, they'll suck that baby back in because they just don't feel safe. And so as humans, we're not going to open up that sphincter if we don't feel safe. So safety is really important, feeling safe, if you can't get anything else from this. Okay, last question was doula, yes or no? I mean, not all doulas are the same. For me, I'm a Christian. I'm going to want a Christian doula. I had a friend at my last birth. Her name's Megan, and she's getting started on her doula journey. And she said, "Hey, can I come and be your doula?" And she held my hand while I pushed, and she prayed over me. And she just was a very encouraging person to have in the room. So it's just nice to be mothered while we are trying to do the work of becoming a mother. I don't know. It's just been really sweet for me to have those women in the room, and for my husband to feel supported, that he's not the only person who's there trying to help me. So yeah, I want to leave room for any more questions if anybody else can think of, even if it's not a question you have, but you think it's like a common question. I'd love to hear it. And I want to tell you before I get off. So since you guys have been on this live call, you're welcome to use the code Beautiful Birth on Labor Without Fear. I just wanted to give that to anybody who stayed on the call. But Labor Without Fear, I made that course so that I can be as helpful for other women, because I'm homeschooling my kids. I've got 5 kids at home, and I thought, how can I be as helpful for other pregnant women who are thinking about going natural while I am at home, because I can't meet with all the women I want to. And so I just took the time over my pregnancy to record 30 different videos and put together this course. And it's been really cool. It's been really rewarding. I think the best thing for me is daily when I log into my email and somebody from my course has, "Hey, I had my baby and here's the story." I literally it's like my high. I love it so much. So it's been really fun. I think there's 70 different women. It's crazy, who have taken labor without fear and had their babies. So it's been incredible. Okay. Emma, I want to have an unmedicated home birth for my first pregnancy. Any tips on determining if it's safe or reasonable for me and my family? My partner is scared and worried about the what ifs. Yeah. I think my husband, he's trained as a physical therapist. He was more in the Western medical world, and it was scary for him. I'm not saying all Western medicine's bad. I'm not saying that. I just think that their model for birth is different. And he was scared for me to do a home birth at the first time, and I did a birth center birth. But when he did the birth center birth with me, he was like, "We really should have just been at home," because honestly, my birth slowed every time I would get in the car. We went to the birth center. My labor completely stopped because I'm getting in a car. And then I had to come back home and then go back, all in LA traffic. And my husband was like, "Bump that. We're just gonna be at home." And yeah, actually the YouTube video I'm coming out with next week is staying busy while you're in labor. And it's harder to stay busy and distracted when you're in labor. It's my favorite labor strategy when you're trying to time getting to the hospital, but when you're at home in your safe place, well, already your home is your safe place. It's your nest. You're going to be able to relax and open up so much more. Too, you're going to be able just to stay busy and distracted. I was making biscuits and anything I could do to stay on my feet, stay distracted. I knew it wasn't long, but I just ignored it as long as I could. And you can do that when you're at home, and you can't do that when you're trying to time getting to the hospital. So I love home births. If you are low risk and the midwife comes, she brings everything that she needs. And she brings another midwife who is only there for your baby. I'm saying this has been in my experience. I've birthed in Tennessee, North Carolina, and California. And it, afterwards, they have everything they need. I always felt safe. I knew they would transfer me in a minute, they've sat down and had all these long hour-long appointments with me, so they know at any point what would be a red flag they need to watch out for, if that makes sense. So when you've had logged all that time with a midwife, they know, and they're going to get you out of their care. They're not going to keep you in their care if it's unsafe. And so that's why just interviewing people and feeling really good about it, just entrusting your life basically into their hands. I think you can do it. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of like, I think it'll be quicker. I think you'll be in your safe place. I think that you're going to be able to crawl into your own bed when you're done. It's literally glorious. They change the sheets for you, and you know, those right after you give birth, the baby's exhausted. So those first 5 hours after birth, they are going to sleep. It's going to be a good long stretch because they're exhausted. I would rather do that in my own bed than being in a hospital bed where somebody's going to come check on me. Now, I get it. There are times where we just have to be in a hospital, and that, you know, but if you can do a home birth, I think it's great. And as far as your partner being scared and worried, I think it's just important for him to get educated. Anytime we get educated on birth, we're going to be far less fearful of it. So I would, you know, say like y'all going through a course together, or, you know, grabbing the Anime Guide to Natural Childbirth. That's a great book, reading through the stories together, but bringing him in is going to be really important, because if you sense fear in him while you're giving birth, you're going to feed off of that. So maybe if you're already there, the focus, you're already feeling safe and good about birth, maybe the focus is on him and helping him feel safe and ready. And there's been times in my marriage with Matt where I was on a different page with Matt, and I kind of had to bring him into like, well, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay. Oh, this is okay. Good question. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I got to hop off because my husband's got a meeting and I don't want to be late for him. If you want the course, use 20% beautiful birth. I'm going to answer any other questions you put in the chat or the comments. I'm going to hop over to Instagram, finish answering those there. You can also DM me on Instagram. I'd be happy to answer your questions. Great questions, you guys. I hope this was super helpful for you. And thanks for being on this live.